So I guess that was definitely harder the second time. And I think even timing of the season, obviously then I was sitting on the bench, well, not sitting on the bench, but off-court role for the whole season, sitting there trying to work out where I can give value to the team, how could I contribute. I was still vice captain, which was crazy to me that people still thought I could have an impact when I felt pretty useless, probably just sitting there on the sideline. But I think that role gave me something to focus on as well. And yeah, a different perspective again, that there was always going to be lessons to be learned and I could work really hard off court, but then learn a bit more on court when I was a little bit older and wiser too. Obviously, when the negotiations are happening, it can get pretty intense. And I think obviously, yeah, a couple of years ago when it was all happening pretty big, that was definitely a hard time to try and lead because I think everyone had questions. And for me, I've come from a background of studying psychology, so I'm not always across all the business side of things and just knowing when to ask questions, when to ask for help. And just being someone I guess people could come to and for me to pass those messages on and just see how the playing group were going.
Hello and welcome back to the Sporting Scoop. My name is Georgia Doyle and today I'm joined by the Sunshine Coast Lightning's Tara Hinchliffe. A proud Queensland product, Hinchliffe has played alongside some of the sport's greatest defenders and is now dominating the goal defence bid for the Lightning. We chat about what she's learned from the players she's been fortunate enough to share the court with, how differently she approached her 2 knee injuries and her involvement with the Netball Players Association as she helps lead the charge for better playing conditions across the sport. Welcome back to the Sporting Scoop. Today I'm joined by Tara Hinchliffe from the Sunshine Coast Lightning. How are you today, Tara?
Hey, Georgia. Yes, really good. Thank you.
So today we're going to take a bit of a sort of deeper dive through your netball journey, which basically spans the entirety of SSN, because you came in sort of in that second year, but we're still in that sort of junior pathway when SSN first started. So I want to start back with your appearance at the Netball World Youth Cup, which was back in 2017, that first year of Super Netball starting. What's your memories of that experience over in Botswana at that tournament?
Yeah, that was a crazy experience for me. I guess I was very lucky to be able to go to that competition. I wasn't in the squad. I had no idea what any of that was before nationals that year. So I was in top age under 19s, I think. So yeah, I feel like it all really came out of the blue, but obviously an international experience is amazing. And being in Botswana, I feel like is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and playing with so many of those players now who we've seen dominate in SSN, diamonds across the world sort of now, was really great experience for me, and I've learnt on that a lot throughout the rest of my career after that.
Yeah, as you said, there's lots of those players that have now come through and are playing at SSN level. I'm fairly sure everybody that was in that team has had at least a contract at some point, which just goes to show how strong that particular cohort was, even though you only managed that silver medal, like losing against the Kiwis, which is always a bit of a sore spot for us. So, but you obviously put out a really good showing at that tournament, because the year after was when you got picked up for that first contract with the Firebirds. Can you remember what that phone call was like, hearing that you'd earned your first professional contract?
Yeah, I think World Youth Cup really gave me that opportunity to play there, whereas I feel like some of the girls who I think I would have thought were ahead of me, probably around Firebirds at that time, didn't have as much court time that year because they were so young. So I feel like for me, getting another full year of netball under my belt, even at the junior level, was great. And then eventually getting that phone call that you got a contract is obviously so exciting. I think mine might have come via an email. I don't know if it was a phone call. So I feel like I just opened up emails one day and saw a contract sitting there. And it's obviously, I feel like something you work for so long towards, but also I was so young at the time still. So I definitely wasn't expecting anything to come from other than, hearing the girls at World Youth Cup talk about their contracts and their experiences. I knew it was maybe coming. But that was obviously really exciting and feels like so long ago to look back on now, even though it wasn't that long at all.
Yeah, you talk about getting an email. I feel like you don't hear that many times. Usually it's pretty much like a phone call that people have to pull over on the side of the road and then they're in tears. So I feel like reading an email, it seemed quite strange. So do you have any idea why it was an email instead of a phone call? Were you away or something like that?
I think it was just that I was just so part of that program within Netball Queensland and sort of there all the time that, I mean, to be honest, there might have been a phone call at some point. I remember the phone call the year before saying I wasn't getting a contract.
Yeah.
And then I think the year after that, I guess I was, I feel like probably so entrenched in that program that maybe they thought I was expecting it. I'm not really sure, but definitely still made it super exciting. And I guess being able to still run downstairs to mum and dad and my sister, I still remember that moment as well.
But maybe they figured if you'd had that phone call the year beforehand, they thought if you saw another phone call coming, it was going to be bad news. So they wanted to oh, wait a minute,
maybe
this time. So
yeah.
some good news. Now, that first year in the Firebirds, you had some amazing players that you were playing onside the likes of, Laura Geitz, Gabby Simpson, which I know are some players that you idolised, and obviously were playing within that defensive end, as well as some of those shooters with Romelda Aitken-George and Greta Bueta. What was it like coming into a team environment with so many sort of greats of the game that were so established in that team?
Yeah, I feel like that was sort of mind blowing to me at the time. I feel like I probably took it in my stride externally. Like it looked like I was pretty cool, calm and collected, but definitely they like Firebirds. I was a netball nerd growing up, so they were all the girls that I've been watching and cheering in the stands for so long. And then I guess to their credit, they made me feel like part of the family and part of the team straight away. They obviously had so much experience, so much success, which is probably a great thing, but also made it hard and that pressure in that first year to feel like I need to make an impact when I came in and get Firebirds back to where they had been, was definitely something that I guess you sort of face throughout any SSN career. You want to come in and make an impact and make sure you're contributing to the team straight away. But those girls, yeah, they make it so easy. I guess they make each other look good, and that's what a good team does is you play well by making each other look good and having that teamwork, and they were, yeah, a great inspiration for that.
Is there any particular sort of more personal lessons, I guess, that they taught you along the way, aside from just all the netball knowledge you were able to really soak up from them?
Yeah, I guess Guitsy then had Barney, so she, I guess, taught us the importance of how important netball was, but also that perspective of having that balance off court and in your life. I feel like she came back that year, yeah, and had a great impact on the whole team in that. Gabby Simpson was someone who really took me under her wing and taught me so much about, I guess, perspective on and off the court. Um, a lot on the court. She taught me like a lot of technical skills and tactical things, but she's been a friend that, yeah, I've had since then. And I feel like she's got such balance and perspective. Again, in terms of riding the highs and lows of netball on court and making sure you show up every session, but then also she really cares about her teammates and cares about her friends. And she has taught me a lot about how important, I guess, that care factor is as well.
Yeah, I certainly think, you talk about some of those highs and lows there. In that last year at the Firebirds, you ended up tearing your ACL during, I think it was a training session, I believe it was. How did you then was that the first sort of big, I guess, injury setback or just setback in general that you'd faced in your netball career? And how did you then sort of get on with it and really work to your rehab in that mindset?
Yeah, it was towards the end of 2021 season. I did my knee, and I think it was just after we'd flown in that morning from the hub. So it had been a bit of a crazy year already, sort of traveling around Australia to dodge COVID at that time. I feel like I was probably lucky that that was my first major, I guess, setback and major injury, other than a few little things at nationals in underage. And I think at that time, I probably took it as a good opportunity to reset and recharge. I feel like you sort of give that perspective that there was things I really wanted to work on and some different strengths and weaknesses that I wanted to develop. So that first time, I was probably quite naive. I was super motivated, and I didn't get too upset at all that whole time. I was sort of just like, okay, great. I guess you play netball, that could always happen. So I was probably just waiting for it to happen at some point. But yeah, that first time in 2021 was probably more of a positive experience than anything. It gave you time to, I guess, be selfish a little bit and focus on what you wanted to work on individually. And then, yeah, that integration back into a team environment just made it more exciting to come back as well.
Now, you talk about that being the first time, which is never a phrase you want to hear when it comes to ACLs. We want it to be the only time if it does happen. A couple of years later, because was it the same knee that you then did a few years later?
Yeah.
But the Team Girls
Yeah.
Cup 2023, the same thing. What was your then, was there a totally different mindset then? Was it more sort of pure frustration of, oh, I've done this already, I don't want to do it again? What was the sort of, mind frame like going through it that second time round?
Yeah, I felt like the second time was pretty different. Even when I first did it the first time, even though I hadn't done a knee before, I felt the pop and I was like, oh, this hurts. I feel like this is probably what it is. So I probably could acknowledge that and deal with that straight away. The second time, it was such a minor incident, Team Girls Cup, and the physios did all the testing and were like, no, you're fine. And I was just like, it doesn't feel right, but also wanted to believe them that it was fine. I was like, I don't know what it would be like maybe I am fine. And it took them a few weeks of lots of different testing and then thinking you'll be waited out, you'll be fine, to then finally getting the scan and then knowing. So I feel like having that time, that couple of weeks where I was sort of doubting it but not sure, maybe it was like a gentle way to be like, no, you've done it again. So I had a bit more time to process it. And I think throughout that rehab, the learning was probably more, learning to trust and be confident in your body. I think the first time I was basing it off so many different role models in SSN who had done their knees once. or even like one each knee and been like, they come back so strong, this will be fine. And you never think it will happen again. So I think it was probably more that trust factor and knowing that I did want to play again and I wanted to try and have a long career. Learn to trust in your body, trust in the team and the physios around you, that they'll make sure that you come back better and stronger and ready to get the job done. So I guess that was definitely harder the second time. And I think even timing of the season, obviously then I was sitting on the bench, well, not sitting on the bench, but off court role for the whole season, sitting there trying to work out where I can give value to the team, how could I contribute. I was still vice captain, which was crazy to me that people still thought I could have an impact when I felt pretty useless, probably just sitting there on the sideline. But I think that role gave me something to focus on as well. And yeah, a different perspective again, that there was always going to be lessons to be learned and I could work really hard off court, but then learn a bit more on court when I was a little bit older and wiser too.
Yeah, you talk about that that leadership capacity, I guess, that you had in that vice captaincy in that year that you were injured, and you've stayed in that vice captain role throughout your time at the Lightning. How do you think your sort of leadership qualities have developed as you've come through the netball pathway? You know, some of those great players that we've mentioned before have also been captains of their team, and then you've got Geitzy, who was also obviously captain of Australia. So what sort of stuff have you picked up from them along the way in that leadership space?
Yeah, I think leadership has probably been a funny word that I've thought about across my career. I was lucky to be like captain of my under 17 Queensland team. And I think when I was younger, I probably just took the lead by example route. I'm a pretty quiet person around the group at different times, and I'm probably better at listening and watching than talking so much. So I feel like at the start, it was, trying to lead by example. And then I feel like those leaders like Geitzy and Gabby, Courtney, Steph now at Lightning, I feel like they've just given you confidence in your voice and that people do want to hear what you have to say, that you've got a role. And I think that balance of on and off court leadership, I think as a vice captain, your captains are obviously, they're going to be stars of the team and they demand so much of people on court and they're such great leaders in that space. And for me, I've probably tried to find a little off court niche and like making sure that we can bring a whole team along for the ride, and that squad mentality and probably that culture piece is where I've tried to lean in. That's something that Gabby Simpson was great at showing me how important that was. So I feel like it has changed throughout the years of being, trying to be on court and be the superstar on court and make sure that I held the pressure that the team had. But then also now looking at where are the little gaps and what are the little ways that you can show leadership and just bring people along for the journey. So I feel like, it definitely has changed across the years, but I'm very privileged to have those roles and, don't take it for granted and finding where I can have an impact still.
Yeah, I think it's something you sort of hear from a lot of leaders in the netball space is it's not only that on-court stuff, but it's the off-court things that you need to be involved with. Like the culture, the team bonding, all that sort of stuff that is so important in netball. And there's certainly a space for those leaders who aren't necessarily the big, bold, yelling at everybody, bringing them along. There's certainly those spaces for those sort of quieter leaders who just sort of go about their business, but still contribute something really important to the team. And I think most teams at the SSN level probably have one of those leaders amongst their ranks. So you talked a bit there about Courtney and Steph that you're obviously now playing with at the Lightning. What was that shift up the Bruce Highway like when you decided to make that move up to the Lightning? How tricky of a decision was that for you to make the move from the Firebirds up that bit further north?
Yeah, it was really hard. I think at the time it was just after I'd done my first knee. And it was probably bad timing that we had a family holiday house on the beach up the coast. So I was lucky that I could sort of escape there. And I was probably just sitting there one weekend being like, this is so nice up here. Like you feel refreshed and recharged every time. For me, being at the beach just gives me that sense of calm. And then an opportunity came up that Kylie Byrne at Lightning wanted to talk to me. And I was like, oh, this is pretty good up here. Like, is this something that I should be taking a leap of faith and making a change? And I think it was hard because I'd grown up through my association level, right down from underage the whole way through, really valuing loyalty and trying to give back to the people who've given so much to me. And I was probably hesitant to leave because Netball Queensland and everyone there had done so much for me, but also the opportunity at the coast to move to like not a member organisation club, the lifestyle. My sister was up here. I graduated uni in Brisbane, so there was nothing that was keeping me right there. And I had some great people and people I really looked up to on the coast. So it was a really hard decision. There was lots of tears calling all the Firebirds girls to tell them. But then also, I guess there's a sense in me that I wanted a new challenge. And with the knee, I thought this is like the perfect time to start fresh and restart again and see what I could be like on the coast and somewhere different. So it was tough, and I still, you're always going to think about the pros and cons.
So once you moved up to the Lightning that first year, Carla Pretorius was still there, obviously one of the greatest goal defenders that we've seen in recent years. Steph Fretwell has been there that whole way, and then Courtney Bruce obviously came up last year, as well as Liz Watson. So a whole nother host of absolutely incredible players that you've then got to play against, especially in that sort of defensive space. You started off playing with, Geitz and Simpson, and then having Carla and Courtney up the coast. What sort of things on court have you really been able to learn off them, and say there was one thing from each player that you've learned along your way? What would you pinpoint that down to?
Yeah, I guess from like Geitz and Gabby, I think was just that dogged defense and that hard one-on-one physical presence was such a key thing that they both did and that we had at Firebirds. I feel like moving up the coast, Carla, obviously being South African, had a different way of thinking and a different way of working, a little bit more of that space defense and how can you create opportunities for people around you and set up some sort of sneaky ball winning times. And then obviously with Cordo, she's that dogged, intimidating defender and having that presence on court, but then also being such a genuine human off the court. I feel like it showed how you have to have that intimidation factor a bit as a defender and be a pest. I feel like Cordo also, she's so great at making sure that she gives us all space to try new things and try and come up with new ideas, but also she's obviously had so much experience for so long over what sort of tactics and strategies can and can't work. So I feel like, that balance of everyone, and for me, probably taking a little piece of everyone and trying to put that together and work out what works best for me and the sort of player that I am, has really helped me having all that experience around me.
Yeah, you talk about having all that experience around you. You've now got Ash Irvin, who's been in the Lightning fold for the last couple of years, as sort of the youngster coming through. What sort of stuff have you tried to sort of impart on her as she sort of is taking her first few steps in her elite career?
Yeah, I feel like obviously she's had such a huge last year. Ash, she sort of came into the scene and really dominated that position last year. And I think you saw her grow in confidence. And I feel like for me, it's really trying to do a similar thing to what Court's done, is just to give little pieces of advice and show her different ways that things can work. But also, Ash is so smart. She reads the game in her own way and she thinks of different questions and new ideas. So I feel like just giving her that confidence to trust what she sees and try and give her that voice. She's come so far, even in just the last few weeks, of having more of that voice on court. And I tell her, I'm like, boss me around. You can see everything from the back. Tell me what you want. Tell me where to go. And you can set so much up for her having that confidence behind me. So I think for her, just giving her that voice and that space, because that was something that people gave me and really helped me to grow on court. And she's a different player. She's not going to be like me and I'm not going to be like her, but just working out how we can set each other up for success.
Yeah, I think there's so many netball players out there that are so different. You've got the really tall goalkeepers, you've got the more shorter mobile ones, same as out at goal defence. You've got the ones that like to fly out for ball, the ones that play that more sort of hard one-on-one marking. And it's always really nice to see that no one tries to sort of fit into that mold. Just because they're playing with someone doesn't mean you have to play the same way. You really all try and play to each other's strengths and really bring that into the game. And that's what's going to be the best for the team. You don't want three players that are all going to play exactly the same. You want to have that versatility to be able to mix it up, which you're seeing more and more with teams these days, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like at Lightning too, everyone's probably getting used to those new combinations and feels like we're rolling off and on the whole game. But I think, everyone's got that different way that they play and be sort of rolling us through when she sees when we can have an impact. And that's really exciting that we have the depth to be able to do that up here.
Definitely, that depth you're seeing pretty much in every single team these days, and you need it because the competition's so tight that there's no way a team of seven's gonna win it in the next couple of years. You've got to have that full 10 or even 11, 12 players that you can call on to
absolutely
get the job done. So you said earlier on that having your sister Maddie up on the coast that year before you moved up was a little bit of a draw card up there. What was she able to sort of tell you about the Lightning environment that sort of helped make that decision that little bit easier, even though you did say it was still quite difficult to really pull the pin and make it official?
Yeah, it was probably just seeing how much, even as a training partner, which can be a really hard space to be in, and she's been a temporary replacement player or permanent replacement player for so many years. She just came home glowing every time she'd come down to Brisbane. She'd be so happy. She felt like she had a role and she knew where she sort of stood in the team. She was spoke so highly of Steph and how much the girls had welcomed her, that I just think, seeing her thrive and grow in confidence up here made me think that they must be something pretty special that was happening. And I feel like, even seeing her go between different teams, Mads has always sort of come back to Lightning and been like, this is home and this team makes you feel like home. And I thought that was, really important for something. If you're going to change your whole life, you want it to be for people who care about you and for you to care about them.
Definitely. Now you had a bit of experience in that sort of international space. You made your diamonds debut a couple of years ago in the quad series over in South Africa. What was the phone call like from Stacey to let you know, first of all, that you'd made that diamond squad and then that you were going to be going away as part of the touring team?
Yeah, that was another bit of a wild one. I feel like I've always been a bit of a dark horse. I just creep into things at the last minute. I think it was just before like the Christmas sort of break, getting ready for I guess a couple of weeks of active leave from SSN, and Stacey just called and said, "Keep training. I think we're going to need you to come into camp just for some extra numbers." And at that point, that's all it sort of was just come to camp, see how you go. It'll be great to have you there, but we just need some numbers of defenders. And then just before we left, I think she just called again and said, maybe just pack your passport, like we might not need it, but just put it in. And I was a bit like confused because I knew there were so many other defenders in the actual squad. And I was like, okay, like I'll put it in. I told everyone, like, see you next week. I'll be home in 5 days. Some of the Lightning girls were like, nah, we'll see you in a few weeks. And I was like, no chance. But I think, yeah, any experience coming to the Diamonds environment is really special. They obviously so high performing. They've got those elite standards. And I think you learn a lot from being in that sort of space. And then, yeah, while being there, I think I just got called into, I think it was Stacey West's room one night, and she was like, okay, you're going to go. You're leaving tomorrow. I was like, okay, great, let's do it. And I think, again, credit to those girls because they made it feel like home. And yes, it was a big trip, but also you have nothing else to do but try and be present and live in that moment. So being there and having Cara and Steph there as Lightning sort of friends and familiar faces was really nice. And they made sure that I felt really welcomed and enjoyed that whole experience, which was awesome.
And you managed to get on court for a couple of games while you're over there. What was the feeling like when you sort of got that little look from whether it was, yeah, Stacey or Richard, like, all right, yes, not only are you sitting on the bench, but now you're actually going to step out on court. How did you feel in that moment?
Yeah, it was really exciting. I think because we had such a squad there. I think it was just the one game that I was named on the bench, and I probably just thought that'll be a great experience. You'll get the whole game day feel, see what things are like and how they work. And then, yeah, in that third quarter, I think we'd built up a bit of a lead, and Stacey looked down and was like, "You're going to go on." And there was only a couple of minutes left, so I think in my head I thought, "How hard can you stuff this up? Like you'll be okay." So it's a very good time to be able to run on. I think I had a couple of like intercept pretty early, so I feel like it was a good chance to get out there for a couple of minutes. Then I think it might have been halftime or three-quarter time, take a breath, and then to stay out there and have more experience is really special. And I feel like, again, to the Diamonds' credit, that no one doubted it. They looked straight at me, gave me a high five, like, "Nat, let's go. We've got you, we've got this." So they did make you feel really confident out there, and it could be scary, but I think being in South Africa too, it was sort of nice. There was like a big crowd for them, but I like not having people I know. I was like, all right, I can just go out and play, and mum and dad will be watching on TV. They'll be fine. I'll talk to them later. So yeah, it was really nice to have that too.
Yeah, and you've done a fair bit of the Fast 5 tournaments as well now over your years, and you've been in the part of the leadership group of that as well. Fast 5 is obviously such an exciting vibe, very different to your traditional netball. What are some of your highlights of having been involved in that for the few years that you've been off to that tournament?
Yeah, I feel like Fast 5 is obviously such a fun tournament to be part of. The vibe's great. Probably the drinks are flowing, the dances are going. Everyone's really excited to be there. And I feel like what you get from that is it's such an enthusiastic and energetic group. There's been a mix of some senior players and then some young talent coming through. And I think that just makes it obviously everyone knows that when you put the Australian dress on, you have to work hard and there's a lot of work to be done. You want to prove that we're the number one team in the world across any format, but also just that element of fun makes it really exciting. And I think the timing that it comes into, it's sort of like the very end of the season or the very start of your next preseason. So it's nice to have, I guess, a reason to keep that fitness up over the off season and make sure you're working towards something. But I feel like, yeah, just the vibe, the energy within those group and the coaching staff are often sort of fresher faces or people going towards that diamond sort of space. So it's always been a really nice, challenging environment, but also really supportive and exciting, which is really nice to be part of.
And on some of that leadership stuff as well, you've been involved with the Players Association for quite a few years now, including through that sort of yucky time the other year when it was all of the collective bargaining agreement. Scandal's not the right word. All the drama trying to get
Yeah.
organised. Because you're vice president on the board for the players, aren't
Yeah,
you?
of the board. Yeah.
So what does your role look like in a regular season where there's no drama going on versus when it's sort of all plastered over the media, everybody's, wanting to know what's going on? What's the difference in the role when it's just sort of, yeah, normal times, business as usual, versus when there's lots of stuff going on around that sort of negotiation time?
Yeah, the role does change quite a bit. I think at the moment, because I'm not part of the Diamond CPA, it's pretty quiet and it's more just making sure that day to day our clubs and making sure that we're talking with Netball Australia and making sure we're following, I guess, all the rules in terms of our contracts, and more just being someone for the Lightning girls mainly just to come to if they've got questions, or working out what needs to happen and when they can go away, when they can't go away, all the little things like that, I think, come into it. Obviously, when the negotiations are happening, it can get pretty intense. And I think, obviously, yeah, a couple of years ago when it was all happening pretty big, that was definitely a hard time to try and lead, because I think everyone had questions. And for me, I've come from a background of studying psychology, so I'm not always across all the business side of things, and just knowing when to ask questions, when to ask for help, and just being someone I guess people could come to, and for me to pass those messages on and just see how the playing group were going. I think it was reassuring to know that throughout the whole time, whether there's negotiations or not, our playing group is so united. And I think that's pretty special when you've got people from all across the world playing together in one league, different ages, different experiences. I feel like everyone feels super supported, and we know where we're all trying to take the sport. And I think, yeah, we're probably just trying to pave the way for the girls who are growing up, girls and boys who are growing up playing now, because so many people have done that for us before us, and set up such a legacy of where netball can go. So I think that's probably why I'm passionate about being involved and trying to be a leader there, is just sort of steering the sport towards, yeah, a really good spot for the future, to make sure that netball stays alive and well for many, many years to come, and that we're a sport that everyone wants to be part of, they want to support, they want to play. And yeah, I think that's a special role to have.
I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head there with that. Yeah, that real unity across the playing group really stood out, sort of seeing it from the outside perspective of mostly just as what was being reported in the media. Every single player backed each other up. You'd be out in the media interviews, and every single player was, resharing everything that was going on. And you could tell that it was that real united front, and that you weren't willing to sort of back down on most of your things. And I think that set the really good precedence of, like you said, you're not doing this for you guys, because most of the benefits of what you're negotiating for aren't actually going to help those of you that are playing now. It's, as you said, setting for the future generations. I think that's a really powerful thing to be doing, is not just doing it for yourself and for your own pockets. You're then going to be helping the future generations, which I think is another thing netball does really well. It's not just thinking about themselves, really trying to set everything up for the future of the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you said a bit earlier as well that your beach is a bit of a calming spot for you outside of netball. You said you've done a bit of study, that Bachelor of Psychological Science. What sort of stuff outside of netball keeps you busy, engaged? If your netball's in a bit of a rut, what do you sort of find yourself leaning towards to sort of reground yourself and center yourself and get yourself back on track?
Yeah, there's probably a few things. I love to be busy. So I've got a couple of different jobs. I work as an allied health assistant at a non-for-profit, and I feel like that's just really nice to know that, I guess, through injuries especially, whatever's happening, there's always something else to go and think about and feel like you can contribute to the world somewhere outside of netball. So that's been something that's been really important to me, as well as coaching, doing a lot of coaching on the coast. I feel like I love being an auntie. My two nieces absolutely make my day every time I get to see them. So it's been so nice to stay close enough to them that I can pop down the highway and see them as much as I can. The beach, baking, cooking, traveling. I feel like probably nothing too crazy, but I just think, yeah, having a little bit of purpose away from the sport has really helped me to, I think, have that perspective the whole time, no matter what's happening. When things are great, they're great. When they're a bit hard in netball, they're still great everywhere else. So I feel like that's been something I've been really important to me, and trying to pass that on to everyone who comes through the system as well, is, yeah, you want to have that balance across your life.
Yeah, I think most netballers are pretty well on the same page about that. I think there's not many out there that only do netball, whether that be through necessity or through choice. They've all got something else that sort of keeps their cup full on the outside, which, yeah, I think, like you said, gives you that balance, especially then if the netball isn't going so well. You've always got something to turn to keep you going, which is so important.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining me today, Tara. I really enjoyed our chat and getting to know a little bit more about your journey through netball, both in the sort of international Fast5 and then the Sunshine Coast Lightning and Firebirds space. Best of luck for the rest of the season, and hopefully there's a few more wins on the board for the Lightning coming up soon.
Perfect. That sounds great to me. No, thanks so much, Georgia. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. This podcast was recorded on the land of the Kaurna people.